Designing our application with the use of controllers helps us to cleanly interact with our persistent storage medium through the process of creating, reading, updating, and deleting, also known by its acronym CRUD. Whereas the user of the system interacts with our view and triggers an action inside of our controller, which will then pass and translate this to our model for interaction with the database to create, read, update, or delete information. In the beginning, we'll be doing most of our work inside of the controller, and it will become second nature in time. Let's talk a little bit about how our application is going to be structured. We need to have our CRUD, or create, read, update, and destroy or delete routes. So let's get rid of what we have, start from scratch, and really start to look at what it is that we're going to need in regards to closures for our to-do app. So we're going to switch back over and take a look at our routes file. So you see in our route, we have our data here. We have all of this information. We're actually going to get rid of everything here. And our first route will be our root route, or our main route. This home route here is going to show us, in our case, a listing of our to-dos. So we're going to need to return a view that says these are all of our to-do lists. That's fine. For now, we're going to get rid of this information. We're not going to pass any data, and we're going to do a view called to-dos. Good enough for a starting point, somewhere to go from. The next thing that we're going to need to do is a route to the same thing, but in a different way, which is going to be /to-dos. This is going to give us our main listing, just not necessarily from the home page. So we can go /to-dos. We're going to need to show each one of the to-do lists. So we'll have a route that shows us the following. So we got to-dos, and then / we're going to want like 1 or 2, whatever the ID of the to-do list will be. Now we've done this before. We'll just use a parameter. This is not going to be optional for us. And then we're going to pass through the ID is what we're going to call this. Put that into our closure. And then we're going to pass through to-dos, and then we'll say .show, which is going to show us our, and then we're going to pass through the ID, and then say ID. So from what we've learned earlier, this will allow us to see our to-do by ID. So let's try that now and see what we get. So our root, it's going to say we're missing a view, which we are. We don't have a todos.blade.php, so you'll see to-dos is not found. We can create that, but what we really want to do is we're going to contain all of our files in a single folder. So let's create a new folder here, and we'll call the folder to-dos. And then inside of that folder, we'll create a new file, and we'll call it index. So index.blade.php. Okay, and we are going to use the same layout that we had here. So we'll copy all this information from our hello file, paste it in. We're not going to need this content. So here we'll just say h2 show all to-do lists. All right. Now go back into our routes. We're going to want it to go to to-dos, but we're going to want it to go to to-dos /index, which will work for us. So we'll go here and refresh it. Actually, it did not. So we're going to update this in both locations. All right, then we're going to refresh our actual root URL, which will say show all to-do lists. And then we'll check our other one, which is also going to show to-do lists. Now here, we're going to see to-dos 1, and that's going to give us an error. So to-dos.show is not found. Now, when we were on to-dos, and it's going to the index, all right, so we've actually lost our styling. So why did we lose our styling? Let's take a look at that. So we'll do inspect here, all right, and then we're going to go to our network, refresh our page, and then we're going to see we're getting a 404 not found because it's looking for the file in /todos/CSS, which we know it's actually in just root/CSS or in our public folder. That means we need to update our layout. So we're going to do that in a moment, but for now, let's just look at the show IDs. So here we have just to-dos. In our routes file, instead of doing /, we can also do .index, which is a little bit easier to read. The dot is just telling us it's also inside of a folder, or it's nested, just like show is. Save it, make sure we get the same result, and we do. Okay, here we have one route for the root. We have another route for to-dos, which takes us to the index. And we have another one that takes us to a show, which hasn't been created yet. And that's going to use the ID as the parameter that tells us how we're going to arrive at the show and what list we're going to view. We can create that file now. Save it. Show blade PHP. Okay. Same thing here that was in our index. We're going to bring all this over. And then this is going to be show list with ID. And remember how we pass in, which is our triple curly braces. And then what is our ID? So ID. Hit save. Let's see if that works for us. Perfect.